195 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie, as we bring you the history of Grand Prairie and some of the folks that are very important in making that history and continue to make history today. We're very honored today. For our history tape number 247, we have a very special couple from Grand Prairie, longtime residents of our city, and it's our pleasure at this time to welcome them. Mr. Jim Swafford.
Thank you, Ruthie.
Welcome to the set.
Thank you.
Judy Swafford.
Hi, Ruthie.
A miracle to get you here. Wonderful to have you on the set today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
It's a delight to have you two wonderful young folks here with us today to talk about your timeliness in Grand Prairie, Texas. And we'll begin with you, with your permission, Mr. Swafford.
All right.
Would you look out into your camera and let's establish your genealogy and begin this almost at the beginning of Jim Swafford.
Well, I was born in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and won't tell you what year, of course. My dad had met my mother in Oklahoma, and he was up there working at the time for Western Electric Company. And I stayed in Oklahoma about a year, and we moved back to Texas. And my family is a native family of Arlington, and so we moved back to Arlington, and that's where I was raised. Went through elementary school, high school, and college in Arlington. And my dad's name was Nolan Swafford. My mother's name
N-O-L-E-N or A-N?
E-N.
N-O-L-E-N, thank you.
And my mother's name was Bernice.
Her maiden name?
Fletcher.
Thank you.
And Dad passed away when I was 19. And Mother still lives in Arlington and is in reasonable good health, and she's 83 years old now.
3 years old. And Mr. Jim Swafford, raised up in the Metroplex, attended Arlington schools. Would you like to tell us about your beginning elementary school, if you remember that, and if you have a favorite teacher or someone that really was a mentor or was a good friend more than a teacher?
Well, I can remember several from high school. Judy was cleaning out some things the other day, and she ran across my report cards, so
oh my.
I can't brag a whole lot anymore, Ruthie, about going to school. I used to before we could find report cards. But, in high school, I had several real good friends and mentors that I recall. Jane Ellis, who was the choir teacher in Arlington High School at the time. Coach Mayfield Workman, who was the head football coach, later athletic director in Arlington schools, was a mentor of mine. James Martin, who was the principal at Arlington High School. The truth is, I stayed in his office so much in trouble when I was in high school that he and I got to be real good friends. Real good friends.
And going to school in Arlington, was there a favorite subject by the time you got to middle school that you had already decided your career path, or were you just kind of going along being in athletics? And tell me about your early school years.
Well, I was probably more interested in being being with the crowd that was kind of, I thought, the in crowd of Arlington, and subject-wise, I was always intrigued and interested in math, and not very interested in English. And of course, that later in my career path helped me out quite a bit. I might mention to you that my family, the Swafford family, is a settler family of Arlington.
How wonderful!
My grandparents came by covered wagon, the old covered wagon story, and from northwestern Alabama in the late 1800s, and settled in South Arlington, what was then the only town called Johnson Station. It was the stagecoach stop between Arlington and Dallas and Fort Worth, and we had a farm at the corner of what's now Mayfield Road and Matlock.
Oh, and wouldn't you have liked to have that right at this moment? That would be an exciting thing, wouldn't it?
It's kind of the north end of the Parks Mall now.
Yes, I see.
It would be good to have it back, let's put it that way.
Yes, it really would. All right, and then in high school, how did you excel that way? Athletically?
Yes, played all sports in high school,
Yes.
even though at my size it was hard to play basketball. But I ran track, played football, and lettered in baseball 4 years, everything, and sort of did the athletic thing, which was the thing that we thought it was the thing to do when we were in high school. And to us, academics came as a result of the sports and so forth.
And on to NTAC, or what was the college called at that time?
Not quite that old.
Not quite that old. North Texas?
No. When I went, it was called Arlington State College.
Arlington State. All right.
And just about the time I graduated, it was changed to the University of Texas at Arlington. That's when it became a university.
And going into school there, what was your major through college?
Well, I went to school on a scholarship from, at the time, Texas Electric Service Company, which is now a part of the Texas Utilities organization. And I went on a scholarship to study electrical engineering.
And was that your cup of tea?
It turned out to be enough to where I could get out. Yeah.
All right.
And later led me on into a career with Texas Utilities in the engineering department and in sales department, and on into some other things.
All right. We're going to get back with you in just a few minutes, and we need to establish Judy because her side of the stage is getting kind of lax here. And Judy, how about looking into the camera and let's have your genealogy and tell us anything you'd want to about your family.
Ruthie, I was born and raised in Fort Worth, Texas. My parents, my mother, well, we're all from Texas. My mother's from Childress. My dad is from Roanoke. And they met in Fort Worth and married and raised their family there. I have a brother and a sister.
Would you like to name your parents? Give us your parents' name and your mother's maiden name.
You bet. My father's Leroy Gibson. My mother is Val Marie, better known as Marie Gibson, and her maiden name was Morgan.
Okay, and your brothers and sisters that you talked about, would you like to name them?
Sure.
Okay.
Robert Gibson, he still lives in Fort Worth.
All right.
My sister is June Bates, and she still lives in Fort Worth.
All right.
We're the only ones that moved off.
Yes, yes, and
To
you
the
moved
big
away to
city.
Grand Prairie, Texas, and that is wonderful. Go east, young lady.
Right.
All right, and your schooling, would you like to talk a little bit about
Yes,
it?
like I said, I went to schools in Fort Worth. South Fort Worth was the very first school I attended, which is an elementary school.
Do you have a favorite teacher?
Yes, I did. I was sitting here thinking about that when you asked Jim. My favorite teacher was my third grade teacher. I think that's probably Miss Parrott was her name. And she was very young, a new teacher. And I'm sure being, much younger, you appreciate a young, vigorous, exciting teacher, and I enjoyed her very much. I went to Poly High School, and after high school I went to, darn it didn't change till a little bit later because I went to Arlington State College.
Arlington State.
Right.
Okay.
And met Jim at a Christmas party while my second year of college.
Oh, that's
And,
wonderful.
Met him right before Christmas, and by June we were married, and that ended my college career.
That ended your college career,
Exactly.
but that was just fine
That was
because
great with me.
the investment in Mr. Jim was better than a college education, right?
bet.
That was her downfall.
That was her downfall. Oh, that is wonderful. I need to get back with you, Mr. Jim. We didn't mention your siblings. Do you have brothers or sisters?
I have one sister,
All right.
Judy Simmons,
Okay.
who lives in Arlington, works in Arlington. Her family's still there in Southwest Arlington, and they haven't gone very far.
I see. They haven't gone very far. They've stayed right near Johnson Station.
Well, pretty close.
They're hoping, I know, to get back to Parks Mall. That would be a you bet. All right. Let's get with you now. Now that you all are both in college and you've met each other, I'd like to know a little bit about what you did after you established your marriage. Were you working and was she working? And bring us up to date.
Well, we got married in 1961, and I had moved to Grand Prairie with Texas Electric in 1959 when I got out of college. I came over here on a 6-month temporary assignment, and I've been here since then.
Temporarily from 59, and this is almost 99.
Exactly.
Oh, that is great.
And came over and worked in the engineering department and for about 2 years. And about the time I made the move to the sales department, I met Judy, and like she said, I believe it was Christmas of 1960, and we were married June '61.
Yes.
And we moved to Grand Prairie immediately, just as soon as we got married, because I was here, and we were planning on starting a family, and she was not working at the time. In fact, she did not work until our oldest child, who is a son, was, I believe, a junior in high school, wasn't it? Yeah. And then she started on a fundraising project for us to send him to college.
Yes, got to do that.
Right.
But now I need to get with you on this Texas Electric when you were a beginning engineer with TU Electric here in Grand Prairie. Name drop some of the people that were important to the history of Grand Prairie that you worked
Sure.
with. Would you do that?
My first boss in Grand Prairie was a fellow that was a strong leader of this community, and you'll remember him, Joe Prigmore.
Yes.
Joe was my boss when I first came to Grand Prairie as a young engineer. And Joe brought me along, and like I say, in about 2 or 3 years, he asked me if I'd like to try the sales side of the company, and I told him I would, and we did that. After Joe left, it was a young man named Tom Bracken.
Yes.
You'll remember Tom, and so will a lot of other folks. Both Joe and Tom were extremely active, as are all public utility managers in their communities, because so goes the community, so goes the public utility company, just like it does the bank. And Tom and Joe were very, very good early mentors for me, Ruthie.
Oh, that is wonderful. That is great. And then when you got into the sales, what happened to your career then?
Well, I was, after a couple of years in sales as what they called at that time a sales engineer, I moved in as sales manager and had a couple of guys working for me, one of whom is still here in Grand Prairie and has been there a long time, Bob Donaldson, and another fellow named Bill Adair, and we ran the sales department. I became the sales manager at a very young age and did that for 6 or 7 years, and then in 1972 I was offered the opportunity to go to Fort Worth with Texas Electric and to manage the department of the company that was called the residential sales, and at that time they marketed the total electric or gold medallion homes, and had about 35 employees that did that for the company, and that lasted for about a year, and I went to work for another gentleman in the area development department for Texas Electric. We called it Tesco at the time, and traveled the United States for about 2.5 years. I had Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York City, and Connecticut, and that was the early days of the industrial boom that we saw here in the Southwest, the Sun Belt, of new companies moving here, and that was, I worked at that job until 1975 and traveled about 1 month, about 1 week out of the month, and then got a chance to make a career change and be a banker, and decided I would do that, and we moved back to Grand Prairie and jumped in a new career.
All right, that sounds like a wonderful jump, and let's jump at this time. Judy,
Yes.
I'd like for you to hold this up
I'd love to.
right like this.
Okay.
Yes, and let's see if we can get the camera to clue in on a wonderful family portrait, and we're going to talk with you about the family since he's been traveling around doing all this good stuff for Texas Utilities. I know that you're on, and while we're holding that up, would you talk about that family?
Surely. This is our family portrait that we had made last October when the kids came. Our our son has moved to Florida, he and his family. So when they came in October, we had this picture made, and this is our son and his wife, Georgie, Robert and Georgie. Then our daughter, Renee, and then the two children are Jane Ann and Johnson, and of course the doting grandparents.
Oh, the doting grandparents. I really ought to let you hold that for a little while and give you equal time, but Judy, since you did not have as much time as he did on the story of your career, I thought it would just be really fitting for you. And name your children one more time, your son and his wife and their children, and then your daughter.
Right. It's Robert and Georgie is our son and his wife.
All right.
And they live in Florida. In fact, we're going to see them next month. And Renee lives here in Grand Prairie. And they're great kids. We're real proud of them. They're good Grand Prairie products, as a matter of fact.
And the grandchildren are the doting ones?
Yes, they're Jane Ann and Johnson.
Jane Ann and Johnson. Well, I know that I'm sorry we couldn't have them with us here today. And on the trip to Florida, I would know what Mr. Jim's going to do while you're watching the grandchildren and all this good stuff and visiting. Golf, maybe?
We may play a little golf.
All right. All right. I know that you have such a marvelous career in the banking industry. I'd like for you to talk just a little about that, but I need to have some time for community service. So kind of hit the high spots on your banking career and tell us what brought you into banking, young man, from utilities.
Well, a rumor I heard that this bank was looking for a marketing officer, and I contacted the gentleman who was my first mentor in banking, Mr. Roland Walden, and asked Roland, and to make a long story short, he recommended me to the board, and the board hired me to set up the marketing department for the then Midway National Bank of Grand Prairie. That board headed up by the late C.P. Wagner, and also included, I might mention, the Honorable Vernon Jackson. So I owe the fact that I came back to Grand Prairie, and we came back and raised our family here in Grand Prairie to that board and those people. I went to work in '75 for Midway National Bank. Spent a couple of years as a marketing officer for the bank. Moved in under the sponsorship of a fine man named Morris Hampton,
Yes.
Who taught me the lending side of the bank. We were acquired by the Republic Bank of Dallas in 1977, and we became the Republic Bank of Grand Prairie in about 1980. We then merged with InterFirst Bank of Texas and became First Republic Bank, and that was, I believe, in 1985. And then in 1988, we went under the ownership of the NCMB Corporation from Charlotte, North Carolina, and that name was then changed in 1992 to Nations Bank. So I've been with the same bank, Ruthie, for 20 years, if I make it till next month.
No, next month will be 20 years. How wonderful.
But we've been under 5, I think, names, that is,
Yes.
in that period of time.
And you started all the way from marketing and now the president of the bank.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I think that is just wonderful. And all of those years you've had mentors all along the way. After Mr. Roland Walden, I know there were others that brought you along.
After Mr. Walden, it was a fellow named Charles Grimes.
All right.
And of course, I couldn't thank Mr. Hampton enough.
Oh, yes.
Who helped me with my entire career and taught me, Hamp taught me the practical side of lending and how to deal with people and how to participate in your community and how to become a part from a banker's standpoint in the community, and it was just invaluable to me. And there was some other folks along the way that Ken Eskridge was a very close friend of mine who taught me the operations side of banking, and I was very fortunate to be able to start to graduate school at SMU and go through that program as a banker, and that was a very large part of my education as a banker.
That's wonderful. I'm going to get back with you in a minute about community service since you've been almost everything, president of the world, as we call you occasionally. Judy, tell us what, after your son was a junior and you decided to go to work and help get him through college and get a career of your own, what'd you do?
I went to work for a company here in Grand Prairie. It used to be called American Hospital Supply. It is now called Baxter Hospital Supplies, one of the companies in that company, and worked there for 16 years in various departments. I was in accounts receivable, accounts payables, customer service, co-support, all different divisions. And of course, as the company downsized, a lot of these departments that I had worked in would move to our central division, and I would move to a different department. But I had the opportunity to take a package and retire early, and I did. I took it and ran, and I'm thoroughly enjoying being at home, doing what I want to do when I want to do it.
Oh, that sounds like almost like an ideal. You don't have her out doing all sorts of yard work or anything, Mr. Jim?
She does all that, and the good thing about it is she gets it all done before I get home.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? Well, Judy, it's wonderful. I know that you're enjoying that retirement. Now you could go with him on these sojourns to play golf in Florida and around the world.
You bet.
That's wonderful.
That's something we've enjoyed doing a good many years.
Well, I know that you have been the wonderful helpmeet and have held up his hands while he does multitudes of community service. A lot of nights you had to have TV dinners and all that kind of good stuff. Tell us about your political career. I believe that's about the oldest that I'm knowledgeable about, your political career in about a minute and a half, and then your school career in a minute and a half, and let's bring you right on up to quality of life.
Well, I was fortunate enough to be elected to the City Council in 1977, served a 2-year term, the last year of which I was Mayor Pro Tem. I enjoyed that service to the city, and I did not choose to run for re-election after my first term. I did stay active in a lot of city committees, which I had been before I was elected. I then ran for school board in 1984 and was elected to my first term. School board are 3-year terms as opposed to 2-year terms for the council. And was fortunate enough to be re-elected twice and served on the board for 9 years. I served as board vice president for several years. I served as president of the board for 2 years. Saw some exciting things happen in the Grand Prairie schools during the time that I was on the board. 3 bond issues were passed. A new superintendent was employed. A lot of new procedures and policies were put into place. Some exciting times in the late 80s and early 90s for Grand Prairie schools to be able to position the schools for the 21st century.
Yes, and that's been a star for you. I'm going to give you an A+ for doing all those things for the city and for the school. But as we wind down this interview, there's still a couple of things I'd like to talk about. And one is you're a Rotarian,
right,
and you've been a Rotarian many long years, and you do yeoman service there. I believe you've been their president. Also, you have been the president of the Quality of Life Foundation, and I'd like for you to talk just a little bit about that and your service on a special commission for the city.
The Quality Life Foundation, I was elected president of 2 years ago after it had been so brought from its infancy to a strong nonprofit corporation by Mr. Harry King and Mr. Drexel Toombs. And we're continuing, along with the help of our 9-member board, of which you're a member, by the way, to promote and use our funds here to better and just really enhance the quality of life in our community. These are exciting times. We've grown that corporation to the point to where last year we acquired a 246-unit affordable housing project in our community. Not only are we providing affordable housing in Grand Prairie, but the profits off of it will go back into the community and in many, many more endeavors. We're excited about the future of the housing of the Quality Life Foundation, and I was appointed this year, as you mentioned, on the Housing Finance Corporation for the city, and we too have delved into the affordable housing proposition for the city of Grand Prairie, and have been the conduit for acquisition of some other affordable housing units, which we think will certainly enhance our community in the years to come and provide a place for low to moderate income families to have a nice home here in Grand Prairie.
That's wonderful. You have made so many contributions in that area, and I personally know that you spent many, many hours of your personal time that really belonged to Judy to look into this quality of life and to make it work and to make the apartments an acquisition that we'd be proud of, and I personally would like to take this time to thank you. And Judy, I want to thank you for letting him spend all of this time doing these good things for Grand Prairie, Texas, because it's been a wonderful thing. But we're going to let you wait just one moment, then I'm going to come back and ask you to look out into the camera and talk to the young folks about applying themselves and how important it is that they get ready for a career such as yours that starts at the elementary grade. And Judy, I'd like for you to look out into the camera and just let us know a little bit of your feelings about being proud of Grand Prairie. Are you glad to live in Grand Prairie, and tell us why?
Ruthie, I am. I love Grand Prairie. I like the feeling of, even though we have become a big city, I love the small town feel of Grand Prairie. I love to go downtown and see people that you recognize on the streets. I love the friendliness of a small town, even though we're not a small town any longer and we're surrounded by the Metroplex. I love Grand Prairie. Yes, very much so. I'm proud of Grand Prairie. I'm proud of my husband, too, by the way.
Yes, by the way, I thought you would say that. And in about the half minute we have left, I want you to talk to the young folks.
Ruthie, another thing I've done that I've been able to keep in touch with the young adults in Grand Prairie is announced the South Grand Prairie Warrior football games for about the past 17 or 18 years, and to participate very closely with those young folks in both high schools. And I would encourage you young people to take an active part in whatever community that you wind up in as an adult or as a young adult. The world is going to be what you make it. The world is going to be what I leave it. Hopefully that'll be a little better than it was when I found it. And I would charge each of you to be a little bit better, make it a little bit better than it was when you found it.
I want to thank you two wonderful people for this interview today. It's just been splendid, and we'll remember number 247 for a long time to come. I want to thank you, for all you do for Grand Prairie. And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.